like slides and pictures and videos and stuff that should help you stay engaged. But think about how to be an active and positive listener and make the most out of this time that we have together, okay? Thank you. And thank you, Dorje.
You're welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm from Nepal, as Jason said, but I'm currently living in the U.S. I've been here since March 31st. And after traveling for almost 8 months in North America, I found myself in Boston and contacted Miss Emery, as you call her, Michelle, and said, hey, I'm close by. You want me to come visit? She said, sure. And here I am. I want to start with some questions for you. What do you want to do when you grow up? You don't know? Anyone know what? Yeah?
I want to be an animator, paramedic, or a farmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's diverse. Animator, farmer, or?
Paramedic.
Paramedic. Okay.
Lawyer, fashion designer, or a cop.
Okay. Lawyer, fashion designer, or a cop. Okay.
Have a part-time job and have a couple roommates in an apartment, and then go into the military.
Military. Okay. Right.
I want to be a game warden.
Game?
Game warden.
Game warden. Someone else I met
Amber.
at the school.
yesterday.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes.
Orthopedic surgeon.
Orthopedic surgeon. All right. Okay. Yeah. Farmer. Okay. Yes. Photographer. And?
Work with horses.
Sorry,
Equine studies.
equine studies. All right. Okay.
Firefighter.
Firefighter. Okay.
I want to be a pediatrician specialist.
Pediatrician specialist. All right. Go ahead. Military. Right? Yes.
Zoologist,
Zoologist.
cybernetics for the military.
All right. Wow. Okay. Now, the rest of you, is it because you haven't raised your hands and you haven't shared anything? Is that because you don't know, you haven't decided, or you don't care? Do you care to share?
I'm not really sure what I want to do yet.
Okay, you're not sure? Anyone?
Is this short term or long term?
Just when you grow up, after college.
What's your dream?
Okay. Don't really care.
Okay, don't really, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I was just curious. All right.
Professional athlete.
Professional athlete. Okay. Next question. How many of you were not even expected to get as far as high school? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So the rest of you, your parents, your community, expected to go to school, expected to graduate from high school. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. How many of you are not expected to go to college? Okay.
I think he's asking external expectations, not internal expectations, but how many of you...
Like your family, your
family
community,
doesn't expect you to go to college?
they don't really care, or they don't...
You want to go, but not because your family expects you to go.
Okay. All right. All right. How many of you in here, how many of your parents, if one of your parents or both your parents have gone to college, raise your hand. Have gone to college.
What if they're in the middle of it?
They're in the middle of it. Okay. All right. So there are some whose parents haven't gone to college. All right. So those of you whose parents haven't gone to college, did they go to school at all? Like high school? Yeah? Okay. So pretty much everyone here, parents of everyone here, either went to school or college. Yeah? Okay. But a number of you here, your community, your parents, your relatives, they don't really think that you need to go to college, that you have to go to college. They don't really expect you to go to college. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Pretty diverse group.
Okay.
Hard to put a
Yeah.
label on all.
Not all, but a number of you.
Yeah.
Right. So the reason I say that is because I come from that kind of background. My family, when I was growing up, I come from a family where there was no educational background. None of my parents, uncles, aunts, grandparents, older cousins. I don't have older siblings. Older cousins. No one. The older ones, the parents' generations, no one went to school. Forget college. The older cousins, couple of them went to school but never finished even elementary school. So when I came along, I wasn't expected to even go to school. Forget about college and so on. But as you probably realized, I've been to college in addition to graduating from high school. And I've had an incredible international teaching career. And have now recently fulfilled a long-term goal of going back to Nepal, and I'll come back to that later. Gone back to Nepal to fulfill a long-term goal. This presentation is all about how that happened, why I did that, all right? With hopes that it will inspire some of you to maybe follow in my footsteps, all right? Okay? Right. Essentially, my idea of what success is about. Okay. So, as Jason said, I'm from Nepal. Before I show you the map, how many here know where Nepal is and can tell me something other than just the geographic location? Yes.
It's a really, really nice country because my grandma went to Nepal.
Right?
And she went with saw a culture in Nepal.
Oh, what?
The culture.
The culture, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I hope things like that travel around.
Okay. Right? Anything else? Does anyone know where it is? Where is it? Where is Nepal? On the planet Earth. Okay. That's a good start. Where on this planet Earth?
Isn't it by India?
It's by India, yes. Anyone can be a little more specific? It's in Asia, yes. Come on, guys. Surely there's one of you here who knows exactly where it is. It's by the Himalayas, yes. Getting closer. Getting warmer. The biggest mountain, yes, is in Nepal. Right. It's between India and China. Well, I prefer to call Tibet. Between India in the south and China in Tibet in the north.
Isn't that called
And-
Indonesia?
I'm sorry?
Isn't that called Indonesia?
Which one?
China? Isn't in that area right there?
No, Indonesia is a set
It's
of
a-
islands that are in the ocean, separate from the mainland.
Yes. It's a country by itself. Indonesia, yeah. All right. And I come from within an area, the area within the blue circle. The village that I come from in that area is called Tangbe. Now, someone here mentioned the Himalayas. The Himalayas basically start somewhere farther west in Pakistan, Afghanistan, come through Nepal, right along here. So where my village is on the other side of the mountains, the Himalayas, and then continues on that way, and Everest is right here. So where I come from is on the other side of the mountains, the area that's actually part of the Tibetan Plateau. All right?
So it's arid, right? And you're
Very arid,
dry side.
very dry, arid. It's basically highland desert. So, extremely underdeveloped. Where the people from there, like myself, were ethnic Tibetans. And the area, because it's highly underdeveloped, of course, people living there were, when I was a child, quite poor. And I used to live there with my grandparents and aunt. And this is the village where I lived. And as you can see, it is basically highland desert. All of that, all of those hills and mountains, what's on them is basically sand, right? And there are patches of green around settlements, small patches of green fields. When I was growing up there, of course, we didn't have electricity, no indoor plumbing. Forget about PSPs and so on, of course. No roads. Yes, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's an off-topic question. How many languages do you speak?
4, 5, yeah. So we didn't have much in terms of amenities, and partly also because we were so remote from the capital city, Kathmandu. The rulers lived, all the politicians, all the rulers lived in Kathmandu, and didn't really care much about remote areas like these.
Well, you know, I hear these guys, not these guys, but students here talk all the time about how there's nothing to do in Manchester, Vermont. I can imagine growing up in your village, like you really have to create your own fun.
Yes. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
not there's no like arcade or bowling alley or movie theater. Or,
Nope. No.
Yeah.
So I was living here with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. Plus, because I'm ethnic Tibetan, in addition to growing up in a poor family, we were considered low caste, and that's a long story on itself. Caste is like a social system where people are placed in a slot, in a hierarchic slot, and we are considered low caste, down below. Okay. However, my parents, even though I was living here for a while, my parents, even though they didn't have any education themselves, they wanted to send me to school, and they used to live in Pokhara, in the nearest city from the village of Tangbe, and they lived here while I lived in the village. And my parents, my dad, asked my grandfather to bring me to Pokhara so that he could send me just to school. But I happened to be my grandfather's favorite grandchild, so he wouldn't relent for a long time. But he did ultimately, and we lived in one of the rooms on the second floor. We had a little room we were 5 of us in my family, 3 brothers and my parents. We had one little room where we had one bed, and every evening my mom would roll out a little carpet for the other one of my brothers and myself to sleep on. And in the summer, when my grandfather would come down to visit, my grandfather and I would basically sleep on the pavement right here because we didn't have enough space in the room. And sometimes when it would rain, the kitchen was on the other side at the back. It was a little veranda, and when it would rain, when water would be dripping down the sides of the walls, our stuff, the utensils and all of the other groceries and everything else were on the veranda, and because it would get wet, we would have to run over to the veranda and basically pile stuff one on another so that it wouldn't get wet. And while I was here, I started attending a public school, and my grandfather, he actually would, in the beginning, not only did he bring me down to Pokhara, to the city, he would also take me to school and come pick me up. He would piggyback me to and from school in the morning and afternoon. The school wasn't too far. It was about a 20-minute walk from here. And ultimately, with movements, we moved residents, and with movement of residents, I ended up moving schools and ended up at this school. Another public school. What do you notice about this elementary school? What do you notice about this school? Yes? Yes?
It looks rusty.
It looks rusty, yeah. Okay. Yes?
Gated in community, and is that it looks kind of like a security camera feed?
Okay. There are walls around it, yeah. Yes? There's no playground, right? What else? Yes.
In the window, like on the end of the building, it looks like the windows are barred.
Yeah, yeah. These windows, yeah. And it doesn't seem to have much of resources. No playground, yes.
Not much room, so it's very small.
Not much room, yeah. Inside, they're actually pretty small. And as a matter of fact, the rooms looked something like this. These aren't pictures of rooms in that school, but from a similar school. All right, what do you notice? Yes.
The chairs don't look that good.
Yeah, they're basically benches. Yes.
There's chalkboard, no smart boards.
Yeah, no smart boards. This is actually a classroom of a school that we help. Okay.
No iPads?
No iPads.
What?
No.
There is a blue colorful door.
Blue colorful door, yeah. There's, I'm sorry?
Poster in the top right corner. Of the
There's a poster, yeah, but it's not even hanging properly. Yes.
It's really blank and bland.
It's really blank and bland, yes. Yes.
The paint is came off.
The paint's, yeah, peeling off at the back. This is the face of public school in Nepal. And this is the kind of resources I had at the school that I attended. And this is the kind of resources students in Nepal that attend public schools have. But luckily for me, at this school, when I was at this school, luckily for me, one of the teachers recognized my potential and took my dad aside and told him, and I quote, "If you want to see your child succeed academically, if you want him to realize his potential, take him to Kathmandu," and Kathmandu is the capital city, "take him to Kathmandu, put him in a good school." Of course, my dad knew nothing about schools. Now, my dad had no idea about education, not having been to school himself. But heeding his advice, he took me to Kathmandu, my dad took me to Kathmandu and asked around, asked some of his friends, acquaintances about schools in Kathmandu, and to make a long story short, I was extremely lucky and ended up at this school, St. Xavier's Godavari, and it's a Jesuit school. I'm sure you know about the Jesuits. You do, right?
A Jesuit school,
A Catholic school,
religious school, right?
right? You know about Catholic schools, right? Yeah. So this is a Jesuit school, and it was, at the time, the #1 elementary school in the country. This was, at the time, probably the only elementary school with a library, for instance. No other school had libraries. Forget about elementary school. No school in Nepal probably had a library. And the reason...
We're talking about, Dorje, just for reference point here, we're talking about in the 80s, 1980s?
Yes. This is 78.
Okay.
Yeah, 78. And even now, most schools in Nepal, except for private schools, most public schools don't have a library. I ended up here, and the reason my father and my mother, my parents were able to send me to this school was because the fees here were heavily, heavily subsidized. The Society of Jesus basically subsidized the fees here, and so my parents could afford to send me here. And it was at this school that the teachers that I had, the North American teachers that I had, inspired me. The first one was called Father Downing, and he was our class teacher when I was in grade 5, grade teacher when I was in grade 5. And he would bring guests to speak to us, just like I'm doing with you here. He would bring guests who were former students of the school, visiting the school, to come and talk to us. And these guests, these former students, would be students who were either studying in the U.S. and had come home for a vacation break, or former students who had graduated from colleges in the U.S. And they'd come in and tell us stories about their life in the U.S., education in the U.S. And that's when I first decided, that's when I first had my first dream of getting myself out of poverty, my family out of poverty, and making something of myself through education. I then dreamt of coming to the U.S. for education, for college education, and then returning to Nepal, ultimately, after my education here, to help the next generation of children born into poverty. And I was also, in dreaming of doing that, I was also dreaming of being the first one from my community, people from my village, the first one from my community to go to college abroad and to get qualifications from tertiary educational institutions abroad. And to that end, to be able to do that, I learned everything there was to about coming to the U.S. for studies. And I also, one of the first things, of course, I learned was that I had to be really good in English. And so I read. This is not the library at the school, but this is one of the libraries that we built for a public school. So we had a library. I read. I knew I had to be very good in English, so I read voraciously. And I learned about the aptitude tests that I had to take. SAT, SAT 1 and SAT 2, I think they're called here nowadays. In those days, they were called different. And as a non-American, I had to also take what was called TOEFL, Test of English as a Foreign Language. So in preparation for those, I read voraciously. But because my parents didn't go to school, because I didn't have any cousins who had been to school or college, because I didn't have any relatives who went to school or college, of course, I had to be basically driven to do this all by myself. I didn't have any role models at home. I didn't have someone to go to ask about my problems with homework, or I didn't have anyone at home to go discuss the book that I had read, the novel that I had read, or the play that I had been in, or the report that I had written, or the story that I had written, or the poem that I had written. No one. I had to be driven by myself. I had to recognize that, by myself, that education was going to be my ticket out. And I basically kept at it. What was amazing was, in addition to the Father Downing, my grade teacher, 5th grade teacher, I had other teachers who were also very, very inspirational. A number of them were, like Father Downing, North American teachers. Teachers like David Beeston, who is from Winnipeg in Canada. Rick Horace, who is from St. Louis. Brother Joe Sheehan. I don't know where he was from, but this visit, I tracked him down and went and spent a few days with him in Palm Springs. These teachers inspired me with the stories they would tell us about North America. David Beeston, I also tracked him down this time, as I did Rick Horace, because they had been such inspirational teachers. And Brother Paul, who was my science teacher. He started when I was in 9th grade, and he taught us chemistry, biology. He was our science teacher. And he was so inspirational that I ended up majoring in chemistry and ended up being a chemistry teacher, because I did very well in chemistry in school. All the while, of course, I was focused on getting abroad, getting to the U.S. for studies. But I didn't share any of that dream, didn't share this dream of mine with anyone at home, because I knew none of them really expected me to finish school, go to college, and become what I had wanted to become. No one knew that that was even No one expected. No one even thought that that was even a possibility. And so I didn't share that with them because I knew that some of them would laugh at me saying, he thinks he's going to be a big man. He thinks he's going to go to college and get a degree. And as a matter of fact, when I was in 9th grade, my father basically had plans for me to get me out of school and start working. But I refused. I refused to quit school and stayed on in school. And luckily, when I was in high school, I heard about what's called the United World Colleges. And I applied for that because they offered full scholarships to Nepalese students to go study at these United World Colleges. And there are 15 United World Colleges all around the world now. There used to be only about 8. And they offered scholarships for the last 2 years of high school and to study at these schools for the last 2 years, basically junior year and senior year. Do your junior year and senior year at these schools, and then I realized I could go on to school in the U.S. And we had students, these UWCs, United World Colleges, had students from all over the world. And I was offered placement at the United World College in Italy. They not only paid for my education, they gave me everything. Room, board, stationery, books, pocket money, and also a ticket to fly to Italy and back for a break in between the 2 years, and then back to school. And we were over 200 students from over 65 different countries studying here, doing what's called the International Baccalaureate. And the teachers were also from all over the world. And here I learned about considerably more countries, cultures, religions. Being a Tibetan Buddhist, I had known about what Buddhism was from my family, from my community. But being born in Nepal, I had learned about Hinduism. And going to a Jesuit school, I had learned about Christianity. And then coming to this school, I learned considerably more about other religions and other people. And I got intrigued by people from around the world. And also, I had the opportunity to travel quite a bit, and that also piqued my interest in other countries, other cultures. And it was during my second year here that I applied to come to the U.S. finally. And again, I had a full scholarship to go and attend Grinnell College in Iowa, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of cornfields. Way out. How many of you know where Iowa is? Hands up. Okay, there are still some who don't know where Iowa is. You don't know where Iowa is? Iowa?
Rough idea.
Rough idea? Yeah. Where is it?
Kind of a little to the right of the middle.
Right? Yeah, it's right in the middle. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Right, so Iowa. I ended up in Iowa. And again, here, I met people from a number of different countries, people from, different attitudes, different behaviors, different mentality than me. And again, my thirst for, my interest in the world and the people in this world, again, was, fueled by the 4 years that I spent at Grinnell. And towards the end of my stay in Grinnell, the spring semester, my senior year, I remember sitting down with a friend of mine to have some ice cream and we were watching the sunset. And sunset in Iowa, amazing because of all the, of course, pollution. We're watching the sunset, watching the sun go down with my friend and I, Aubrey and I, and she says, well, what are you going to do next? And I remember what I told her. I said, I'm going to go see the world. But the trouble was, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do it. It was spring semester. I had just a few more months, and I was going to be done with my Grinnell career. However, luckily, amazingly, I had an offer for a teaching position right back at the school in Italy, where I'd been a student. And so I went there, August 1994, and that got me started on an incredible journey of exploration, of travel. I worked as an international teacher, as a science, as a chemistry teacher in 10 different countries, from country in the west, as far west as the United States, to country as far east as Hong Kong, as far north as Norway, and as far south as Malawi, and a number of countries in between, United Kingdom, Azerbaijan, Qatar. And I traveled, of course. I traveled in about 36 different countries. And I did some amazing things. Yeah? I slept, snow camped in snow caves up north in Norway, and scuba dived way down in the east, Philippines, at depths of 31 meters, and went hiking to altitudes of 17,000 feet in Kathmandu, and went on safaris in Tanzania, in Zambia, in Africa, and went hot air ballooning down in Australia, over here. That's me. You might not be able to tell. And skiing all over, in Georgia, in Norway, in the U.S., in Pennsylvania, in New Mexico, Taos, in Switzerland. And I learned to play the didgeridoo, and I learned to salsa and merengue, and I learned to play ultimate frisbee. I had quite an incredible professional career and an incredible experience learning about the world and learning things that I had never imagined I would. Tasting food, developing a palate for flavors that I didn't even know existed. Developing an interest in music that I didn't even know existed, that I would probably have never been interested in had I never traveled. But all this time, I was studying abroad. All this time, I was working abroad. Of course, I'd been telling myself I would go home. I'd return to Nepal to help the next generation of Nepalese children born into the kind of context that I was born into. So after doing this for a little over 15 years, I ended up in a country called Qatar in the Middle East. And it was there, after a little over a year of teaching in that country, that I decided, this is it. I'm going home after my second year, 2013, would have been 2013, June. I'm going home at the end of June to be involved in social work, to be involved in the education of the next generation of Nepalese. Except, I would take a small detour. On May 1st, 2013, I was thrown in jail in Qatar. I was alleged to have insulted Islam. And on the 8th day, May 8th, a friend of mine, an American friend of mine, went and spoke to a journalist who published my story in Doha, an online newspaper, published my story, which then got picked up by friends around the world. And they started a campaign. Free Dorje Gurung, Release Dorje Gurung campaign by my friends all around the world. And the campaign got so big, got so huge, because it was participated on by people all over the world. Friends from my school in Nepal, friends from my school in Italy, friends from Grinnell College, friends that I'd worked with around the world, colleagues that I'd worked with, former teachers, former students, acquaintances of friends, and people who believed in human rights and justice participated in this campaign. And on May 12th, I was released from jail after 4 days of campaigns. Oops. I was released from jail. And so the 12th, I was released, and pretty soon, the next day basically, I returned home and started working on what I had been planning to do all this time since 5th grade. I run an organization with a friend of mine, and we basically help schools in Nepal with resources. And this little video, this short video, gives you an idea of one of the schools. It gives you an idea of the public schools in Nepal, and this is of one of the schools that we work with. And this was made to woo potential donors to my fundraising campaign a little over 2 years ago. But it still gives you an idea for what schools are like in Nepal. So,
I want to be a policeman.
I want to be an engineer.
I want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a...
we're here in Sindapalchok at the school that you're supporting. You've just heard the dreams and aspirations of the students. But there's a huge gap between their dreams and reality. The reality is that the school doesn't have enough classrooms. For instance, this particular classroom, they have had to put 2 different classes together. And right now, there are over 50 students in here. The other issue, the other challenge here is the quality of teaching. Although the teachers themselves are highly committed, they lack experience and they lack training to help the students realize their dreams. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that you provided me thus far. I need one final push to get us past the tipping point, to help the children of Sindapalchok achieve their dreams. Right. Okay. That pretty much brings me to the end, but in conclusion, what I'd like to share with you is 3 things that I believe in and 3 things I hope you have gotten from this presentations. 3 quotes, as it were, 3 things that I have written about, have talked about extensively in my blogs. Here's the first one.
Can anyone summarize what that means? Live life in others' terms, you'll fail no matter what. Live life in one's own terms, you'll succeed no matter what. What does that actually mean? Kira and then Dre?
It's like if you live your life listening to others and believing them, then you won't meet your goals, what you want to do in life. But if you listen to yourself and say, I can do it, you can reach your goals.
That's awesome. You want to add to that, Dre, or you think she got it?
You mainly got it. Just if you try to live someone else's life, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah?
Do your own thing.
right? Yeah.
Do your own thing, but be true to yourself. Don't just do it partially, right? Like really be true to yourself and go after your dreams, go after your goals.
All right. And the next one.
Same idea, right? There is no universal truth. The truth is how you perceive the world and what you do within it.
And finally,
Is that in front of yours?
yes, yeah. This was on this trip actually, on Mackenzie Pass in Oregon. Yeah.
Anyone want to speak to that? What that means? What that means to you personally? Cheyenne, go ahead.
No matter what you lose, just always think of the silver lining because something bad's going to happen soon.
Good. Can you say that again loud enough for everyone to hear?
No matter what you lose, always look for the silver lining because something good's going to happen soon.
Always believe that there's a way out. There's a future, right? There's a silver lining.
Keep striving. Keep striving.
We have like 10 minutes.
Right. And if you need more information, there you go. And you've also liked my page, so you'll be able to get more information from there as well. And thank you. You've been a great audience.
So I know that's a lot of information to process. His story, his history, how he came to be in this place. Any questions? Any questions specifically about Dorje's story? Or questions about how that applies to your own life, right? Because it's one thing to talk about something happening literally on the other